Viktor Frankl survived 4 concentration camps, rebuilt his career from nothing, wrote more than 30 books, lectured on 6 continents, received 29 honorary doctorates, and died peacefully in Vienna in September 1997, aged 92, surrounded by his wife Ellie, who had shared the last decades of his life with a tenderness and partnership he never tired of describing as one of the great gifts of his existence. Man's Search for Meaning had by then been translated into more than 50 languages and had sold tens of millions of copies. The Library of Congress had named it one of the 10 most influential books in America. He had, against every probable outcome of the years between 1942 and 1945, lived long enough to see his ideas enter the bloodstream of the culture. But the question of a legacy is not simply the question of influence. It is the question of whether the ideas are still alive, whether they continue to do what Frankl intended them to do, which was not to provide intellectual frameworks for comfortable academic discussion but to help suffering human beings find a reason to keep going. By that measure, the legacy is not merely intact. It is, in some respects, more urgently relevant than it was when Frankl first articulated it. The world Frankl described, a world whose primary psychological disease was the existential vacuum, in which the collapse of traditional meaning structures had left millions of people spiritually homeless, in which the desperate chase for pleasure, power, and stimulation was masking a profound inner emptiness, has not been superseded. It has intensified. The technologies he never lived to see have accelerated every trend he identified: the pace of distraction, the scale of comparison, the depth of digital anonymity, the erosion of genuine community, the reduction of human beings to their measurable outputs. The existential vacuum he predicted has become, by almost every available indicator, epidemic. And yet, with equal force, every serious attempt to address this epidemic has confirmed the basic insight of his work: that meaning is not a luxury or a supplement to psychological well-being, but its foundation. The research literature on meaning and purpose has exploded in the decades since Frankl's death, and its findings have been remarkably consistent with his clinical observations. Meaning predicts well-being, resilience, and physical health outcomes across cultures, ages, and life circumstances. Its absence predicts depression, addiction, and premature mortality. The empirical science has, slowly and sometimes reluctantly, caught up with the testimony of a man who developed his theory in the worst conditions human beings have ever created. Frankl's clinical legacy is substantial and still growing. Meaning-centered psychotherapy, developed by William Breitbart at Memorial Sloan Kettering, has become an evidence-based intervention for cancer patients and the terminally ill, with multiple randomized controlled trials demonstrating its effectiveness. Acceptance and commitment therapy incorporates Franklian insights about values and self-transcendence. The field of existential psychology has found new vitality partly in response to the questions Frankl kept insisting were clinical realities rather than philosophical abstractions. But perhaps his most important legacy is not clinical. It is moral. Frankl demonstrated, with his own body and his own life, that the human being is not simply a product of their conditions. That when everything external has been stripped away, something essential remains, and that something is not trivial. It is the capacity to choose one's response, to orient toward meaning, to maintain the dignity of a person even when all the social scaffolding that ordinarily supports personhood has been destroyed. This demonstration was not made in a laboratory. It was made in Auschwitz, and its authority is commensurate with where it was earned. The 21st century faces challenges that Frankl could not have fully anticipated: the meaning crisis in young people, the atomization of community, the crisis of purpose in an era of unprecedented material abundance, the existential weight of collective threats on a civilizational scale. His ideas do not solve these problems, but they offer something more important than solutions: a way of asking the right questions. What are you living for? What does this specific moment of your specific life ask of you? What would be missing from the world if you had not been in it? These are not comfortable questions. They are, in Frankl's spirit, demanding ones, the kind that, answered honestly and lived accordingly, transform not just individual lives but, in their aggregate, the culture in which those lives are embedded. That transformation is, perhaps, the most important work available to any human being in any era. And it begins exactly where Frankl always said it began: not with a philosophy, not with a system, but with the specific, irreplaceable, utterly ordinary and utterly extraordinary life you are already living. In the end, what Viktor Frankl's legacy offers is not a system but a posture, a way of standing in relation to the question of one's own life that refuses both the paralysis of despair and the evasion of easy answers. It is a posture of genuine engagement, with the specific demands of one's specific existence, with the irreplaceable people in one specific world, with a unique contribution that one specific presence in history makes possible. Frankl arrived at this posture through the hardest possible route. Most of us have the extraordinary good fortune of being able to approach it through his testimony, through the record of what one human being discovered about the human capacity for meaning in the place where that capacity was most severely tested. The discovery is his. The application is ours. And it begins, as he always insisted, right now, in exactly the circumstances we are actually in. Subscribe to The Psychology of Viktor Frankl to explore more of his timeless ideas.